Hello and welcome to the March edition of the University of Strathclyde's Inspiring Conversations. I'm Manish Joshi, Chief Executive of Strathclyde Students' Union, and in this episode of Inspiring Conversations, I'm delighted to be joined by Susan Aktemel, Founder and Executive Director of Homes for Good, Scotland's first social enterprise letting agency. Susan is one of Scotland's most successful entrepreneurs. Since 2014, she's raised over £20 million in social investment for Homes for Good. Named Social Enterprise of the Year in 2016 in the Scottish Business and Social Enterprise Scotland Awards, and in 2017 Susan received an Honorary Doctorate from University of Strathclyde Business School for achievements in social enterprise. Susan is one of 8 Senior Enterprise Fellows at the University of Strathclyde, a group of inspirational entrepreneurial leaders who are working to help inspire the next generation of entrepreneurially minded graduates, researchers and academics. Welcome, Susan, and thank you for joining us today.
It's good to be here in this lovely new building.
Well, thanks very much.
I would like a tour later.
Oh, I'm happy to give you a tour, and it's nice that you're here in the midst of graduations as well,
It's
I guess.
lovely. It's lovely to see people around.
Does it bring back any memories of your own honorary doctorate?
It does.
Yeah. And
that was a good day.
Yeah, was that a surprise when you received that? You've been quite
It was
involved with the
real-
institution, haven't you, for a number of years?
It was a real surprise. It was
Yeah.
a real surprise, actually. I got the letter from Jim into the office, and it was one of those letters you sort of skim read it, and then you go, "What does that say?" So I had no idea that was coming. Really honoured, and the day itself was just superb.
Yeah.
I didn't have any concept of the level of pomp and ceremony that there would be.
Yeah.
So it was lovely.
Yeah, for the tech, we do not bad on pomp and ceremony. I think it is great, and it's great today. Like, we've got to see some actual student staff that we had from 2 years ago who are graduating for the first time now, obviously because of the pandemic. So it's just been nice to see them here with our family. So good to have you with us. I guess to start with, can you tell us a little bit about you, for those that don't know you, your background, and what led you to work in the social enterprise sector?
Yeah, that's a funny question. I was thinking about that. You know, the social enterprise sector sort of evolved after I had decided what my path was going to be. So it was like a retrofit where people started saying, "Oh, you're a social entrepreneur and Impact Arts is a social enterprise," and I was like, well, "What's that then?" You know.
Yeah.
So I suppose, where did I start? I started here in the Livingston Tower, 4th floor, studying languages and business.
Okay.
And you know, I think all the different decisions you make when you're young just take you down a road, don't they? They take you down a path, and you go, and you know, and every step takes you gradually down a different path. And I started off when I graduated. So I did languages, and I came back into the university to teach, actually. So I went down a sort of career road of teaching. I really loved it, and teaching adults. So worked in further education, worked in higher education, and then I ended up working with English as a second language. And that led me on to working with adult literacy and teaching adult literacy. Right. And that's when I had the eye-opener to what actually was happening in Glasgow and the levels of poverty that there were in Glasgow, which I had been probably quite sheltered from in my upbringing and I hadn't really experienced. So I took a decision when I was probably 23, that although I had a lot of opportunity because of my languages, I took a decision that I was going to focus my professional skills into helping people in the city improve their lives. And that was a really deliberate thing. So I then focused in on working in communities and getting to know the city and all the different communities, but I was also really interested in the arts and creativity, and what I saw was that people respond to creativity in a different way than they do traditional English, maths, IT and all of that sort of stuff. Okay. So that sparked my interest, but I was also looking for a business idea, and I'd gone through a few business ideas, but when I came up with this idea of that I could essentially become a freelance arts manager and work in communities and help them design art projects and engage people in the arts as opposed to only looking at things like literacy and numeracy, that was where the idea of Impact Arts came. Right. And so I created that as a sole trader business originally. It's now a national charity all these years on. But that in essence was a social business because the service we were providing had social impact, but it was actually just me as a sole trader making it up as I was going along. Yeah. And so I think it's safe to say that, you know, I think social enterprise started to be getting talked about as a regular thing in the UK and in Scotland probably around about 2004, 2005. So by that time I'd been running Impact Arts for 10 years.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying about the retrofit.
Absolutely.
People started to call me this thing, and I was sort of saying, well, I don't really know what that is, but okay.
And did you ever get a chance to try out any of those earlier ideas, any of those earlier businesses you mentioned there before you got to Impact Arts?
Yes, because what happened was you would try something and then you would go, I could build a business out of this. So one of the things was corporate language teaching, going into corporates. So what would happen is the universities and the colleges would get the commercial contracts, and a couple of the corporates that I was teaching in said, we would employ you directly, and here's what we pay the university, or the college it was at the time. It wasn't the university. I would never undercut Strathclyde, I hasten to add.
I'm sure Jim might have something to say about your Honorary Doctorate.
And so I did a quick business plan of it and thought, actually, this is quite this is viable. But I never managed to do it, and I think it was just that my heart wasn't in it, even though languages are my big love and what I think I'm a superpower, you know.
Okay.
I just didn't make the jump, and with Impact Arts I did.
So what was the difference there? Because I think that's an interesting, because you're not short of ideas, you're not short of enthusiasm. So what was the difference then? What do you think stopped you from doing some of those and made you take the jump with Impact Arts?
So I think now what we would call it would be purpose, sense of purpose, although I don't know that I recognised it at the time. But I just really, really, really cared about what I was doing. Yeah. I really cared about the different, you know, I cared about going into a community centre where the children had never been to the theatre before, ever. Yeah. And just creating something that everyone was going, what is this? This is a bit bonkers, but brilliant. I just loved the whole process of it. I loved going in, working with, you know, the men and women who were volunteers in these community centres and who were living in poverty themselves, but just really open to opportunity for the people that they were supporting. So it must have been a strong sense of purpose. Yeah.
No, I think that's really interesting, especially for people who are maybe on a similar journey right now and are toying with ideas and think about what they might do when they leave university or think of coming to university, but have an idea. I definitely think that sense of purpose is strong. And so you've had a very successful time with Impact Arts. You could probably have hung up your jacket and gone, well, I did quite well there. But you started Homes for Good, which was a whole new concept in letting, I think, pioneering in terms of Scotland. So tell us a bit more about Homes for Good and what it does and why it's different to just going to any old letting agent.
Yeah. So I think, you know, Homes for Good came about at a crossroads for me. So in 2011, I had done 18 years with Impact Arts, and I think I was ready to hand it on to somebody else. I didn't really want to do it anymore. I didn't love it anymore. You got to, when you run your own business, you've got to love it.
Yeah, 18 years is a good shift, like good taking shift. A child to adulthood. Yeah, so you kind of went through all the different phases, I'd imagine.
No, and it's funny that you describe it like that, because with Impact Arts, it was probably about year 14, 15 that I thought, I don't really love this as much as I used to, but it wasn't ready for me to, I think it would have struggled to survive without me at that stage. So I was very conscious about developing the board and developing the assets and creating my exit. Yeah. So by the time it was 18, it could live on its own sort of thing. So there are the analogies of being a person. But in 2011, that had happened, and I'd also won an award with Ernst & Young, which was quite an achievement for me. I was really sort of quite proud of that, and it just felt like I was at a crossroads. But there were other things going on as well. The property market had crashed, which created opportunity. Every crash creates opportunity for somebody, and I saw that there was opportunity, but I also saw there was a lot of need as well. And then I am a landlord myself. I have been since 2000, and all of our properties were managed by letting agents. But when it got to 2011, I realised that the letting agents that we were working with actually were not great, and 2 of them went bust in quick succession. So I had already decided I was leaving Impact Arts to do something else, but I didn't know what the something else was. And then I had to take my property portfolio into my own hands, when the letting agents went bust. And then it was actually my husband said, why don't you become a letting agent? I thought that's an atrocious idea. And then he said, do it the way that you would do it. And then it was almost like I instantly saw Homes for Good. I just visualised it. I thought, okay, it'll be a social enterprise. There aren't any others in the country that run like this, so that's interesting. And I like being first. Not that I'm competitive, but I like doing something that other people have not done before. I suppose pioneering. I also knew that I loved property and I loved the concept of home, and that I wanted to work in property full time. And I thought, right, I have got another business in me and another social business, and I want it to be values led. I want it to do all the things that are the opposite from what people expect letting agents to do. So at the time it was really easy to set up. I just set it up with my own portfolio, got some grant funding, so I almost like walked away from Impact Arts and started again as a start-up, not knowing how to open a bank account and having to work out where to get a logo from and how to incorporate and everything. So it was a really exhilarating time. So Homes for Good now is really what every letting agent should be. It's values-led. We focus a lot on landlords and letting agents being able to trust us, to be able to trust our integrity, our expertise, that will take care of landlords' investments at the same time as making sure our tenants are happy in their homes. We operate as a social enterprise, and what that essentially means is that landlords and tenants know for a fact that we are not driven by maximising profit, that our values and our social aims are really at the core of what we do. And so I created that. But then there was also this issue that I was seeing with tenants on lower incomes who really ideally would have lived in a housing association property, but the waiting lists are so long, there's not enough social housing in the country. So they were then, their only alternative was the private rented sector, and very little of that was affordable, and the properties that were affordable were quite often in very poor quality with really questionable management. So because of that opportunity I'd mentioned earlier about the property market, I saw a financial model that I thought could work, that was about buying dilapidated properties and making them beautiful homes for people on low incomes. So I could see that I could, because of the way that rent levels were and the property prices at the time, I could see that the fact that it was financially viable and that the social impact could be really, really strong as well. So I then went down the road of saying, okay, I need to raise some investment. And that was really where that side of things started.
And did you have experience in the past of raising money like that? Because obviously Impact Arts was it more like grant led and applying for grant funding, whereas raising investments a different ball game in some ways.
Different ball game. So there's a lot of things that are similar, I would say, and you've got to define and articulate what the project is and what the plan is. You've got to know your finances inside out. But raising investment on the level that I knew that I needed to raise it, it was a world that I knew nothing about. And I'd mentioned about being involved with Ernst & Young. That was actually quite a crucial part of my development, because after I won the award with Ernst & Young, they asked me to be a judge. And so I spent 3 years in the company of very serious private entrepreneurs who were raising millions of pounds like it was they were eating their breakfast. So that enabled me to just be around them and learn and learn the language, but it was really, really different, very challenging. But I was up for it because I could see the opportunity and the need of what I wanted to do. So I thought, right, I just need to learn this language of investment, and I just need to go down to London and get this money, because once I've got the money, I'll be able to deliver everything I want to deliver. So I was really, really determined to do it.
No, it sounds like you were very driven. So what are the biggest challenges you're facing today, and how are you overcoming them? Because it sounds like you knock them down when they get in your way anyway, but what are you doing about it?
Do you know, it's when you'd asked me to have a wee look at some of the questions, and quite often I struggle with challenges because challenges are just, I'm not going to say something cliche that they're there to be jumped over or whatever, but challenges are there to just be jumped over, aren't they? I think that in terms of running a social business, if you like, the challenge is always balancing commercial decisions and social decisions. So you have to think I always talk about running a social business as a commercial mind and a social heart. but actually the social thing is what makes it really, really different. So sometimes, like, there'll be decisions I make and they're not commercially the right decision, but actually they are absolutely the right thing for the people that we're working with. So and so then there's the challenge is making sure that the investors and the people that are around you and your board respect that and also are on the same page as you, so that you're not being challenged about these things.
Do you have a methodology for that at all, or is it more like kind of you go with your gut in some of these things, or is there like a methodology? So if tomorrow you were kind of hit by a bus, God forbid, would the organisation have a sense of how it would make decisions based on those heart elements that you've somehow embedded in the DNA, or is it very much down to you as a leader that a lot of that happens?
What would happen if I was hit by a bus? I'm going to be careful walking home after you've said that now.
You definitely should.
So I think, if I think about the way that the senior team, the way that we all work together, I do the head and heart thing in my head just instantaneously. Alice, our Chief Operating Officer, is much more about head. She's much more about what does that mean, and the consequences and setting precedents and what are the financial implications. And then Joey, who's our head of lettings and tenancy support, is probably a wee bit more about heart. Okay. So they would have a debate. But when I think about the different people on my board and our investors, they are in balance. Okay. So I think we would probably get to the same decision. And one of the things when I'm making decisions around the social, or we're collectively making decisions about the social side, we always have the finances not very far away. So we can articulate, look, we're going to do this, and this will mean that this might be a reduction in profits of X amount, but we've already thought that through and we can handle it. So it's always very carefully, doing the right thing is always well, we consider it carefully.
And I guess you're highlighting the importance of governance there as well. Right? So it sounds like you've thought about that a lot. I guess even earlier on you talked about impact arts, you thought about exit and planning it. Yeah. So what role does governance play, I guess, in kind of ensure you've got a thriving social enterprise?
Do you know, that's an interesting question, because depending on what mood I'm in, I'll either say I love having a board, or I'll say governance is there to be, to
finagled around.
I think that governance is, well, what does it mean to me? It keeps a level of accountability for me, and I think that's important for me because I quite like working on my own. But it's also the people that we've got on our different boards, they are so supportive of what we're all trying to do and what I'm trying to do, but they're also challenging, and they are the source of great advice as well. Yeah. So I think the different, so there's I suppose the way that I work with my boards is the way that you're supposed to, really.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. And in the past I've heard you speak about the importance of having an adaptive mindset as an entrepreneur. Do you think there's like certain attributes you need to have as an entrepreneur to succeed, or do you think that's kind of, you take different people and you mould them whatever's required for the business? Do you think there's a set of skills that actually every entrepreneur should have?
I think there probably are, and actually, and when you were saying, you'd heard me talking about an adaptive mindset, I thought, did I? What is an adaptive mindset? And it's just about, I actually went and had a look at the definition, because I thought, I don't remember saying that. But it is around being able to work out multiple scenarios and very quickly navigate your way through multiple scenarios. So I think there is that, definitely, because it never goes according to plan. So you've just been able to regroup. I read at the weekend actually that the number one attribute, I think it was in Inc. or Harvard Business Review or something, it was an article, the number one attribute that an entrepreneur needs is persistence. And I think I would agree with that.
It's pretty, you can't just get knocked back. I think you take your first knockback and you're out, then I don't think you're going to get to where you need to get to, are you?
So I very much agreed with that. I think there's also something around self-belief, but measured self-belief, because if self-belief goes too far, that's where you see the businesses that implode and the founders that get themselves and the business into trouble. Yeah. But I think there is something about being confident that you can do something.
I think there's a fine line, isn't there, between confidence and arrogance. Yeah. And there's so many examples. There's a new program coming out about the WeWork story. I don't know how much you know about WeWork, and looks like they've dramatised it now off the back of a biography or something. But it's interesting when you take a company, a unicorn basically, multi-billion-dollar company, but actually built on very loose foundations and built around an ego and a personality. And I think it's that fine line, isn't it, between being confident in what you've got, but actually getting so arrogant that all of a sudden the purpose and the social mission's not there at all anymore. So,
and there have been some really pretty spectacular social enterprise collapses where when you've actually looked behind it and you've tried to understand what went on, ego's not far from the surface. And there are businesses that are not social businesses necessarily closer to home that we all know about, where similar things have happened, where the founders have thought they were they were beyond question, and that becomes I think quite dangerous. So there's something about being confident in your own abilities, but taking counsel, and also listening when people say no. So and that sort of ties into the persistence, because I remember when I was raising the investment, I mean, the number of people that told me, even people very close to me, that it was a stupid idea to try and raise investment to buy property at a point where the whole property market was frozen and on its knees. And I just was so sure of the model. I was so sure about it. But I did get to the point where we were down to our so the investor that invested in us, people always say, why did you choose that investor? And I have said, because everyone else said no. Actually.
Right, okay.
And I did remember thinking, if this, there was a sort of crucial meeting where they were deciding if they were going to take it to their investment committee or not. And I did get to the point where I thought, if this investor says no, I think I'll give up, because that's too many people are saying the same thing. But they didn't say no, they said yes.
Okay.
So there is just something about, being confident, but also listening and just self-questioning about,
And did you have to make changes along the way then? Sometimes when you were taking that feedback from people and then adapting things?
I think you definitely have to do, and I think that's why we ended up with one that said yes, because you start off with your idea, and then and one of the things that I always say to other entrepreneurs that maybe I help now is that when somebody says no to you, they will be kind enough to tell you why if you ask them. And so if you ask them why it's not of interest to them, they will give you a reason or reasons, and you then need to look at those reasons and say, okay, am I willing to change that? Or should I change that? And so I think that probably the Homes for Good investment proposal that I presented to the guys that invested in us in 2014 might have been 25% different from the very first time I presented it. So it there was an iteration that it got to a point where it just tipped and it landed.
And it sounds like you're now at that point where you've got your £20 million you've raised, which is no insignificant sum. What are the plans over the next kind of 5 to 10 years then for Homes for Good?
Yeah, I think we're at a really funny time, because we had really clear plans, and then COVID hit, and what happened over the last 2 years is, well, probably the 18 months up until about September 21. So March 20 to September 21, everything was just, you were just keeping going, you were just keeping going. But what we realised was that we came out of COVID quite strong, quite strong as a team, quite strong financially, stronger than we might have expected to. We also did an exit, which is quite an unusual thing in the social investment space. So we paid back our first investor 3 years early. Part of that 20 million was 3 million of a refinance. And I thought, right, we need to grow again, but we're all just feeling a bit tired. So we're not quite as gung-ho about growth as probably we should be. But the plan is, there's a couple of things. We want to raise a further 20 million to get the portfolio that we own up to about 500 units. So we currently own just under 300. We want to grow the letting agency to 1,000 homes under management. I would quite like to acquire another letting agent.
Right, and well, I'll tell you, there's plenty of our students here at Strathclyde who I think are clients of yours as well. Chatted to quite a few students, and obviously we've got a captive audience around here who I'm sure would be very keen for Homes for Good to acquire more properties round about, the East End and round the university, because you do, I think, make a difference for the students who stay in your properties.
I think we do take care of our tenants really well. I'm really proud of what we do, and I'm proud of the quality of the properties that we manage, and particularly in our own properties. All of our own properties are interior designed and fully furnished.
Okay.
It's quite unusual.
Uh-huh.
So there's the whole idea around growth, around raising more investment, and then looking at, I would really love to acquire another letting agency. But the big thing that we've got to focus on this year is what we do in other parts of the UK.
Okay.
So we do have funding to expand into other parts of the UK, and we're currently actively looking at Northern Ireland and London.
Okay.
And that feels like quite a big step.
Uh-huh.
But that's definitely in the horizon over the next few years. And I think that I'm definitely within 5 years, I will have stepped back into a board role, and will be handing on the leading the business in a day-to-day to somebody else.
It sounds exciting, and I saw this week another social enterprise, Social Bite, just opened up in London, up on the Strand. So, I guess they're working very much with homeless people. There's sometimes greater need in some of these bigger areas with more people, and I guess bigger markets as well to go into. So that's an exciting prospect.
Yeah.
Right now, where do you operate at the moment then within Scotland? Are you just...
So we're in Glasgow. Probably about 3/4 of the property we manage is in Glasgow, and the rest would be in Ayrshire and Renfrewshire, more or less, and some in Lanarkshire. So really just Glasgow and the surrounding areas.
Yeah, okay.
But I was down in London last week, and I think it's brilliant. The Social Bites in London, they've got a simpler business model.
Yeah.
And obviously, brilliant location for them actually. But I was down in London going, where are we gonna land in London?
Where to start as well? It's so big. You got somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah. Liberty to disclose that here?
No.
Not yet, but it's going to be interesting though.
I think. I mean, what I will say is that we spent time before the pandemic scoping London out. Worked alongside Crisis to look at the need for a more social approach to lettering in the private rented sector in London. So that enabled me to look at all of the different boroughs, and I realised that there are 32 boroughs in London, and there's 32 local authorities in Scotland. So I'm going, okay, so I've got to just think of London like Scotland. That puts it into a bit of perspective. I'm gravitating towards the East End of London.
Okay.
For a whole number of reasons.
Yeah.
And I was literally down there going, I was sort of looking at shop units. I was looking at I went to visit a couple of spaces. So we'll find. I'm a great believer that you suddenly just land. It'll happen. But that's what we're thinking.
That'll be an interesting place to be in. I guess a market that's in need of disruption, because I lived in London for a while, and the lettings market there is just like, it's pretty cutthroat. I guess in the private sector anyway. There's a lot of charlatans, shall we say, that are just out to try and get you in. I remember going to see a flat with my wife and literally rapped the door at like 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and nobody was expecting us, and people turning up in their pyjamas and try to show you around and things like that, and letting agents try to go, this is a great flat, you should take it, and you're like, no, they weren't even tidied, they weren't expecting you. So yeah, I think it's definitely a market in need of disruption, and it'll be good to see you down there.
The bit I'm looking forward to is the mystery shopping. I love that bit. That was what I did when I started Homes for Good in Glasgow. So I am going to go down. We've got partners that we're thinking about working with in London, and we've got 2 of our board members are based in London. So lots of goodwill, and lots of I think people want us to go to London. But it's just trying to, I'm really keen to do some mystery shopping as a tenant. Yeah. Just to see what the experience is. I can find out from colleagues what the experience is like as a landlord, but I'm very interested to see what the tenant experience is when you work with letting agents. So,
and we've talked a wee bit about social entrepreneurial failures. Have you got any? Who are the people you look up to, whether social entrepreneurs or I guess just entrepreneurs in general? Have you got any people that you kind of look up to, or businesses that you kind of pay close attention to?
I think in terms of people who inspire me and entrepreneurs that inspire me, I suppose there's 2 types of entrepreneur that inspires me. The ones that manage to scale something, because I really struggle with that. I just don't think Homes for Good is big enough, and I do give myself a hard time about why is this not bigger? Why are you not growing this faster? So I'm always really interested when I see entrepreneurs that have managed to scale something successfully without it turning into something that they didn't intend it to be. But the the other types of people that really inspire me are the young, particularly the young social entrepreneurs that are coming through, who just come up with brilliant ideas and they make it happen. So probably the way that I was when I was starting off. So I was down in London on Friday at the WISE 100 event, the Women in Social Enterprise, and one of our investors had nominated me for one of the awards, and I went down, and there were young women just talking very modestly about the businesses that they'd created, and they were, one was Pivot, which I was fascinated by, where it's a jewellery maker, it's an architect that has set up a jewellery making business, and she employs people who live in hostels, and the jewellery is designed in such a way that you can make it without blowtorches and anything that might be considered a safety risks, and the jewellery is designed in that specific way, and it is generating a living for them, and it's a viable business. That's just amazing.
Aye, totally.
So things like that. It's probably less about particular role models and just more about the people, all the different people that are coming through the entrepreneurial ecosystems, and we see. I'm on the board of CIS Ventures, which invests money in impact-driven businesses in Scotland, and there's just no end of people trying to make things happen. Yeah. So I wouldn't say there's any one individual person. Yeah. But it's just more being inspired from all the people you see around you, and taking bits of what they've done and seeing if you can apply it to your own.
I know, that sounds great. And so I guess my next question is, do you think those people are shaped by their environment? Is it kind of like nature versus nurture? So is there a pattern, do you think, for this? Or is there something out there, like you talked about the ecosystems, was the ecosystem helping us to deliver those social entrepreneurs? Or are they just made, are they born, and they just need a vehicle to get their idea out there? Nature nurture is something that I've not really looked into that, and I don't fully understand it, but what I think is that, just in the way we were talking about what I did at the beginning, and how I started and how I ended up in social enterprise, I think it's life experiences that shape you. Yeah. So, how have I ended up? So to start a business, you have to have confidence, and you have to be a bit of a risk taker. There are a number that you have to be a self-starter. There's all these different ingredients. Where do they come from? So for me, one of the earliest things that I did as a young teenager or as a teenager was I went to Spain on my own when I was 17 for 3 months, and I didn't really speak Spanish. I'd done first year here at Strathclyde. Didn't really go to any of the lectures, did a crash course in Spanish, but I got to Barcelona, and I thought I can't string 2 words together here, and then also had the added joy that they didn't even speak Spanish in the family. It was Catalan, so I had to learn, but I thought, okay, I need to learn both languages at the one time. That was my response to that, which looking back at 17 years old, I look back at what I did then and think, God, I wouldn't have the courage to do that now. But I came back from Barcelona after 11 weeks, completely fluent in Spanish, completely fluent, and really understanding Catalan well, and that gave me complete self-belief that I could learn how to do new things. So actually setting up a business that in an area that I'd never done anything before didn't seem like a big deal, because I'd proven to myself already that I could do new things, which is go and live alone in another country and learn a new language from scratch. So I think I don't think it is about you're born an entrepreneur, but I think your life experiences and your environment does shape you. Yeah. No, I think that's great. That's great. And is your Spanish still as fluent as it was?
Bit rusty.
Yeah. Well, lockdown's not helped with the travel side of things, is it?
It's actually not as rusty as you would imagine. I mean,
it's like a muscle, isn't it? Like it's kind of there. You just need to exercise it.
It is. I think my German's a huge amount more rusty.
Is it?
Yeah, because I don't really speak that at all. But I do have the opportunity to speak Spanish a few times a year still. But yeah, no. So I think, and just you were talking about the ecosystem. We've got, I think in Scotland we've got one of the best entrepreneurial ecosystems in, well, the world probably, definitely Europe, and for social enterprise even more so. Yeah. And I think that when I was starting Homes for Good, So you remember I talked about impact arts not being a social business until somebody told me it was.
Sure.
I couldn't get any decent business support when I was starting impact arts because the minute it wasn't a very straightforward private business, the business advisors didn't really know what I was talking about. Whereas with Homes for Good, I got all sorts of support. There was just different and still to this day, anything we need support with in Homes for Good now, from Scottish Enterprise or from Firstport or from, there's a whole number of even from the university, people and organisations that are willing to help. So actually being an entrepreneur now in Scotland, I think is quite cool. You're not on your own.
No, I think you're right. There's been some great articles recently just about the ecosystem for SMEs in Scotland and in Glasgow in particular. Like the city's taking a bit of a kicking. There was an article this weekend in the Times just about how dirty Glasgow's got over the lockdown and things like that. But I think people forget sometimes some of the great stuff that's actually going on here in the city, and you mentioned the university there, obviously. I think things like Inspire, things like the Hunter Centre, having the entrepreneurial fellows, I think highlights the commitment the university's got, and the student union as well. Actually, we've got a new strategy which has got enterprise at the heart of what we're doing, because we really think those are the skill sets that people are looking for. Whether you've come here to study languages, we still think it's not a bad thing that you actually think about, well, you might want to monetize that one day. You might want to go into a business and be able to understand how the P&L works, because that's just part and parcel of what the expectation is from employers. So I think enterprise seems like it is becoming a much bigger part of what students are looking for. It's a much bigger part of what the university is looking to provide, and we as a union want to make sure that that's what students feel like they're leaving with in terms of skills. They might not get them on their course because they're here to do a humanities course, but actually there's still an enterprise element in there somewhere. So no, I think you're right, and I think the ecosystem is hopefully growing over the next few years.
Yeah, I think it's been difficult. It's been really difficult when we've all been in hibernation. Very difficult doing all this stuff online and everything. But yeah, and I think a big part of the way that the ecosystem works at its best is networking events and awards events, and where you do get the chance to mix with maybe people that are your role models, or that is all slowly coming back. So that can be a good thing.
No, I think so. And so last couple of questions here then. So what's one lesson your job has taught you that you think everyone should learn at some point in their life? You've actually touched on quite a few, I think, through the conversation, but if you will leave people with one thing you think everybody should maybe pick up.
It's really funny when people say think of one thing, because you can't just think of one thing. You go, can I not have two?
You can have two. It's not Desert Island Discs. You can have more than one.
So I think, this might be, I don't know whether it's cliched or not, but the thing that came into my head. So I'm a great believer when somebody asks you a question, you just answer with the thing that comes into your head, because it will be the thing. And actually, it was do the right thing.
Good.
Just do the right thing. You have to make lots of decisions in business all the time, and there'll be times, always aim for a win-win. Never do something that actually you don't feel as if you don't feel as if that was quite the right ethical thing to do, or you've done well at the expense of somebody else. That because when you do the right thing, you sleep easy.
Yeah.
And that there's no price on that. So I think just always do the right thing by people.
Yeah.
And then the second one is about instinct. And this is really cliched, but every time something has gone wrong for me, I spotted it and I ignored it. Okay. So just always listen to your instincts.
Yeah. Good. It's good advice.
Yeah, I would say.
And you've talked about 5 years' time, you may be stepping back from the day-to-day, but like, what is next for you? Because you've obviously had quite an exciting career to date, but what's next?
I don't think there's a third business.
Okay.
I don't think there's a third business, because it takes a level of energy and personal sacrifice that I think I've done my shift on that now. By the time I am stepping back from the day-to-day of Homes for Good, it will be probably the best part of 30 years that I'll have just been knocking my pan in, and and I don't think there's a third business.
Good to know your instinct on that.
Although I would just love to have a flower shop. This is just something that everyone thinks is dead funny. I nearly bought one actually not that long ago. I would love to do that.
Right.
And then I'm thinking it would be a social enterprise flower shop, and and then the whole thing starts again. But actually, when I was starting Homes for Good, with the sort of period of investment, there was a 9-year investment sort of period, and it does make you think, what are you going to do at the end, and you also look at what money you stand to make out of it at the end, because Homes for Good is a sort of half private, half social sort of hybrid structure. So, you know, there will be wealth created for me in Homes for Good as well as for the organisation once, you know, that I'll step away from. And I have thought about what I would do next, and I've got something in my mind about working with young women and probably going back into the communities where I started.
Okay.
So going back up into Pollock and Easterhouse and Rochesy and those places where I just saw brilliant women.
Aye.
And actually lots of women that probably did have depression and didn't know their worth, and just, you know, that had so much potential but just didn't, the conditions were not there for them to realise their potential.
Yeah.
So there has always been something about going back in where I started and doing something really special and different, but I don't know what that is, and I don't think it will be a business.
Yeah.
It might be a charitable foundation, or I'm not sure what it's going to be, but that's where I'm gravitating back towards local. And one of the other things that came into my mind actually this morning when I was thinking about the questions again was, I've got a friend, Math, who has set up this movement called Camarados,
Yeah.
which you might have seen.
Bringing it here to the university, I believe, next semester. It was, I think, one of these things that's been delayed because of COVID, but we've been talking about bringing it here, and I think it's a great concept for tackling isolation and loneliness, friendship.
So we brought it to Bridgeton.
Oh, there you go. Brilliant.
So we need to join forces on that.
Okay, that'd be great. No, that'd be really good.
Math is a good friend of mine, the founder.
Okay, right.
Very, very smart guy. Quite bonkers, as you probably gathered, but just a real brilliant brain and a real brilliant man. And I was thinking about Camarados, and I was thinking, you know, that is something that is so simple and replicable and generous. And I thought, I wonder if I could design something. Because designing, again, going right back to where I started in designing, teaching and designing projects and training programs and things, I thought, I wonder if there's something that I could do with young women in communities that then could become a movement. You know, that is low cost, low barrier to sort of getting involved, isn't a money maker for anybody necessarily, but just makes a difference to lots of people locally. So that's what's sort of going on in my mind. But it's quite far in the distance because Homes for Good is front and centre. I mean, I just think, you know, I'm just still very in love with Homes for Good, so I'm not really ready to really start formulating something else quite yet.
If I've picked anything up from this conversation, I'm sure there's something in that nugget that you'll probably continue to ruminate on, and it'll hopefully develop into something over the course of time. But thank you very much for chatting to us today. It really has been lovely to speak to you, and I'm sure there's plenty more that we could be talking about.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to join you. It's a real honour to be invited to talk at my university. You all know how much I love Strathclyde, so it really is a proud day to come and tell you all the nonsense that I've done in the last 30 years.
Well, I think some of that nonsense is really going to inspire people. So that's it from us here. So that's the end of our inspiring conversation for March. Thank you for joining us, and remember to tune in next month where another inspiring entrepreneur will join us for an inspiring conversation. To find out more about Strathclyde Inspire and our Inspiring Conversation series, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter, or search for Strathclyde Inspire on the University of Strathclyde's website. Thanks again.